Somebody foretold me Ganon is coming for me. Why is the king of Hyrule not dead? He was looking kinda cringe with his hoodie and his skin and an eye of malice on his forehead. Hello everyone who's here. This is Knightmare with a very unusual special video. As you know from the title, this video deals with Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Please note that this is not an objective but subjective critique. I will be honest about my thoughts about the game and will also make fun of it for entertaining purposes. This video is not supposed to be a hate speech about the game. I'm glad I bought it and will probably continue playing it up to 100% because I enjoy the gameplay so much. You are more than welcome to discuss the topics featured in this video with me and others in the comment section or on Twitter. There are also many aspects I could not feature since there are way too many things to talk about considering this game's controversy I'm going to dive into. If you enjoy this video, please smash the like button and subscribe if you have not already, because why wouldn't you? I promise I won't sing again. No, I can't promise that. That being said, let's get started on why I think Age of Calamity has failed. I was really looking forward to Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity. Not to say I was hyped as f. The demo with Chapter 1 and some side quests was quite promising after the hype train already took off with the game's announcement. The music also was a potential banger. That set my expectations really high. Was this the game that would make 2020 not that bad at last? The gameplay was very different from the first Hyrule Warriors game I played earlier this year, which I enjoyed so much that even my Smash performance had to suffer from my addiction to this game. In Age of Calamity, the new combat concept of counterplay with the Sheikah runes, which sets up better opportunities for you to smash the weak point, is very innovative and fun. Parrying and Flurry Rush also do the combat a lot of good here. It really feels like Zelda Breath of the Wild with Dynasty Warriors elements, while the first Hyrule Warriors is more likely to be called a Dynasty Warriors with a Zelda as its theme and a Zelda fanfiction as its story. Additionally, I played on hard mode since my Hyrule Warriors experience from earlier this year should not be as easy in this game, which made me decide to turn up the difficulty. That was a good decision because it made a careful and less meshy playstyle rewarding. The aspect of grinding and side quests for levels and weapons felt really good as well. I always forgot about the factor of cooking before a battle, but that one is on me. So, from a gameplay perspective, Age of Calamity met my expectations as I hoped. But there's one huge aspect which disturbs me and really tests my passion about the game. The story. I will go through the aspects I dislike one by one. The little guardian is often referred to as Egg, while I personally like to call him R2-D2. Jokes aside, this little thing confronts us with 3 problems. The first one is probably one only I have. I can't see any personality in it, since it is a machine, a robot. It does not have feelings. It is only programmed to make the little sounds it does, do the things it does. It is no person, which makes it hard for me to feel with it when it gets possessed by Calamity Ganon and destroyed by the player. The fact that it's named Terraco tries to change the way the player feels about it, since naming things normally leads to bonding to those things. However, the game's approach to bond with Terraco fails terribly in my opinion. Even that you can play it if you repair it does not solve this issue for me. The second problem with it is that its programming does not make any sense. The fact that the awakening of Zelda's power activates it in the first cutscene is pretty hard to imagine to be programmed. That's because we do not get to know how Zelda built it in the first place. The connection Zelda feels towards Terraco is not to question, but how did it activate and travel through time, exactly knowing what to do? The questions why Zelda's tears awakened it one last time before it could destroy Calamity Ganon's barrier in the final battle, and why that is possible at all, are not answered. We also do not know why the tears of our beloved princess caused it to call the champion's descendants from the future. That these riddles remain unsolved straight up makes me want to bite into a piece of wood. The last unsolved question I just mentioned leads us to the final and biggest problem with Terraco: time travel. Terraco's remaining screw apparently is the key to time travel, which is not further explained because why would they? While the Zelda timeline has been already split once since Ocarina of Time, Breath of the Wild was the game to unite the three parts of the timeline as one once and for all. According to MatPats from the game theorists, even the first Hyrule Warriors game could unite them due to the travel through different dimensions.
Hyrule Warriors doesn't just help explain why so many timelines appear mixed up in Breath of the Wild, it is the piece that we've been missing that connects literally everything in these games. It explains some of the seemingly new out-of-the-blue things that show up in Breath of the Wild.
But when Terraco awakened in the first cutscene of the game, the catastrophe of time travel was unleashed upon us again. The Breath of the Wild timeline was split up in two timelines. One with Terraco sleeping on Zelda's shelf, the World of Ruin, where Breath of the Wild takes place. Another one with Terraco traveling back in time to save the entirety of Hyrule, which is where Age of Calamity is set in. Sadly, the madness of time travel does not stop there. When Zelda, Link and Impa escaped from the castle after the revived Calamity Ganon took over, Zelda bursts into tears over her presumably dead father. This leads to Terraco opening the gates of time again by calling Yunobo, Riju, Teba and Sidon from the future. The champion's descendants from the era of ruin are transferred into the world of Hyrule. I have several questions. Why is time travel the crucial factor that the developers create their story on? Since when does time travel actually make a positive addition to the story and not completely ruin it? Has no one here seen The Flash Season 3? Or does this not look similar to you?
You're not gonna kill her this time. You're not gonna kill her ever again.
No! I will not allow you to take her again!
Manipulating time has always consequences, which leads to the timeline being split up again at this point. This means we got ourselves three different timelines. The World of Ruin, the era of Breath of the Wild, the newly created timeline by Terraco, and the slightly changed timeline where Terraco did not call Yunobo, Riju, Teba and Sidon. One timeline being split up in three, huh? Doesn't that sound familiar? To me, this is very frustrating, because it is absolutely not what the Zelda timeline needs and deserves, in my opinion. Not to say, I was quite angry when the developers revealed their newest messing with time in the Zelda franchise to us. This was, however, due to a different reason. As I already mentioned, I was expecting a lot from Age of Calamity. Maybe too much. Even the advertising was successful in misleading my hopes for the game's plot.
I think you are now ready. Ready to hear what happened 100 years ago.
This would mean you get to see how the champions die and the Calamity takes over Hyrule. Getting a Zelda game that dark really got my hopes up. These hopes were completely shattered by the time travel that I personally did not expect. The champions get to live, and not even Zelda's father, King Rome, dies in the attempt to protect the castle and his daughter. The game ends with the Calamity being successfully defeated and everyone being happy. I never wanted this. I expected Age of Calamity to be much darker and sadder than it was due to the post-apocalyptic world we are presented in Breath of the Wild. Or, as a boss I might put it,
Well then, we seem to have been taken by surprise.
this not being true hit me really hard, since one game this year also decided to change its good, original and dark story choices into something more happy ending-like. The Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I will not go into detail about, is also guilty of changing the story we know and love. But the choices the remake makes, and I dislike so much, are very different from the source material. I'm talking about you, Zack! Do not get me wrong though, Link and Cloud Strife might actually be my favorite video game characters, which is heavily influenced by the Smash Bros. Appearances. But that exactly is why I so passionately dislike the way the developers treat the original games the way they do. I do not know why they refuse to kill their characters. Maybe because they want to earn the save money from a game with an ending that will make the majority of fans happy. By killing characters in the story which could cause a shitstorm, They risk the success of their precious money-making game. Opposing to that, you could say that the story in a Warriors game should be ranked second. Slaying huge armies of enemies is the prior factor which makes these games so great and enjoyable, which I agree on the one hand. On the other hand, the advertising for Age of Calamity has been more story focused than gameplay focused, which is clear if you look at the weekly published teasers for the game. While one party might say, "That's how advertising and marketing works," I have to differentiate between advertising and manipulation. That is because Nintendo is manipulating us, knowing that we want to know what happened before the Calamity. However, they do not deliver the true history of events we know from Birthright. They deliver a what-if scenario, which is what disappoints me the most about this game. It is supposed to be canon, but does not only not keep its promise but as well create new timelines in the process. This really leads me to questioning which Hyrule Warriors game is canon and which just a fanfiction. An additional annoyance this game provides is the main antagonist Calamity Ganon, who is supported by the Prophet of Doom, Astor. Starting with Calamity Ganon, the main antagonist only really appears at the end of the game, which is quite typical for many Zelda games. His Breath of the Wild version also is not the Gerudo King Ganondorf. He is more likely to be described as a fusion out of Malice and Sheikah technology, while the bearded Malice spider thingy had some charm to it. What they did here made me regret spending $60 on it. The Malice corrupted Terror Core of this timeline, which houses Calamity Ganon's power in it, called Harbinger Ganon, gets fused with Astor, which ultimately creates this. My first thought was how he could be a Malice Son Goku, but when I saw his face, I had to think of a purple Halloween pumpkin. You can't unsee it now, huh? But what bothers me the most about this thing is the body structure. Ganon never had proportions like a giant bodybuilder before, and now we also know why. This looks gross as hell and should have been scrapped from the concept as soon as possible, in my opinion. Now talking about Astor, he was first seen in the trailers and led to many theories after the game released. The problem I have with Astor is that we do not really get to know his origin story. This was not a problem when we saw him in the trailer. I thought he might be a descendant of the Twilights, the ancient tribe led by Midna from Twilight Princess. The symbols on his hood also reminded many fans of Gerudo-related symbols, which might show his connection to Ganon. However, his pale skin color, his scary eye bags, his black hood, his interest in technology, and his skinny posture are not normally associated with the Gerudo tribe. It is more likely to find these characteristics when looking at that one introvert in your class who is standing alone at break time. Hello, that's me by the way. Jokes aside, as the second most important member of the opposing party, after Calamity Ganon, he is the one we know least about. The few information we get is that he is a fortune teller, that he is a servant to Calamity Ganon, and that he grew up in a small village. This little information makes it really hard to form a good protagonist-antagonist relationship with him, since you only encounter him in battle twice, and he rarely speaks of his origins or plans. This makes him a really flat character, which is no good for the story either. At second sight, Astor's bleached white skin color also reminded me of Girahim from Zelda Skyward Sword. With the game being criticized very often for its motion controls and other things, I had no choice but to replay it this year. My first playthrough was a huge while ago and I wanted to re-experience the game. When I played Age of Calamity and stumbled across Astor, I felt reminded to Girahim in some ways. He is also not that well explained either, and yet a better example of one of the many servants Ganon had over the years. He really puts in the work to build a relationship with Link, which makes him really special and, let's say, unforgettable. Both Astor and Girahim revived their master to be ultimately abused by them after being of no more use to him. Despite the similarities, Astor is literally centuries away from being as well designed as Girahim. I would even go so far and say that Nintendo tried copying themselves but failed in the process, since creating an interesting antagonist servant is more complex than just feeding the player little hints and an edgy look. Another character who has not merely enough personality but is playable anyways is the monk, whose inclusion makes absolutely no sense to me, but covering him is just too much for now. To conclude, my thoughts about Age of Calamity are very split up. From a gamer's perspective who played both Hyrule Warriors games this year, I really think it is the true successor of what a Hyrule Warriors game should look and feel like. The hard mode made it even more enjoyable since my experience from the previous game was put to a test here. Yet, from the perspective of a Zelda fan who actually cares about the consequences the game has on the franchise, I absolutely hate it. Resplitting the timeline after it being united by Breath of the Wild is a horrible choice to make in my opinion. I think this game definitely has the right to exist. If its story met my expectations, the game would be so dark, depressing and demolishingly good. If Nintendo would have been bold enough to let history pass the way it did in Breath of the Wild, I would probably rate the game 10 out of 10. Sadly, the game makes some really odd choices in story and characters, which makes the game a 5 out of 10 to me. I am not saying it is a bad game as a standalone. The problem is how it is a curse to the Zelda timeline. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity feels more like a cash grab than a service to the fans of the Zelda franchise, which makes me really sad. I want to enjoy Nintendo games, but sometimes I feel like they do not want me to. That being said, I really want to know what you think about the points I discussed, so make sure to leave a comment with feedback here or on my Twitter. Make sure to watch Zeltik's and Commonwealth Realms videos as well, since they really help me understanding the story and forming my opinion about it. I highly recommend watching MatPats video on the Zelda timeline and other game theory videos too. I hope you have a nice day and I see you all next time. Don't know when that is, however. Until then, good night.